So, Coogs House, sometimes you just run out of time. Sometimes things don't go your way. Life's hard as a Houston Cougar. We knew that. That doesn't make it any easier.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. In a lot of pain right now as Houston falls in the national title game. If you're here, though, you probably already knew that. I'm going to try and find moments to be positive about it. Going to try and find moments to talk about the game. Try and find moments to talk about what happened. But I don't have a whole lot of notes here. We're just going to roll. We're just going to riff. I see there Florida fans have found the chat, which is fine. Cougs fans, just be respectful. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. I'm sure we'll talk about them a little bit later. But like I said, Houston falls 65-63 in the national title game. They held a lead for a lot of this one. I think Florida, between ties and Houston leads, I think the thing said Florida had the lead for like a minute or something of the basketball game. Not that the lead was ever crazy. I think Houston's biggest lead got up to 12 at one point early in the second half. And we know from being on the other side of that, that's not decisive. Houston holds Florida to below 70 for their, I think, just the second time this season. Defense was strong. Frankly, I was talking to Pete Bukowski a lot on a lot on Sports Today, and he brought up, honestly, if you hold that backcourt between Elijah Martin and Walter Clayton to a total of 5 of 20 shooting, you'd think you have a pretty good chance. I think if you hold Florida, you think you had a pretty good chance, and really you had a chance. I think that's why this hurts so much. I think the other thing that hurts about this so much, though, and I think this is where I want to start, is Houston's beaten down the door, right? Final Four 2021, Elite Eight 2022, injury in 2024, injury in 2023, right here in 2025. Houston's beaten down the door. This thing is coming. It's going to happen. Don't know when, and I don't know what it's going to look like. I just know that the last, 4 or 5 years have had a lot of these faces on it. And as Walter says here, I love these guys. I'm just sick. Been following this program as student alum since 2005. Thought this was our year, really did. I think what makes me sick is this group specifically. These guys have been so close for so long, and it felt like they were so close again. Obviously, there are offensive issues that happened in this game. Obviously, there are things you want to fix, things you want to take back, things you want to change. But ultimately, you look at this and you just feel bad for those guys, man. You play that game 10 times, it comes out 10 different ways. Florida won that one. Who knows? You go 5-5 across that 10-game stretch. That's 2 incredible basketball teams. And that's the fun of college basketball. It's not a best of 7 series. It's never a bunch of 3-game series. It's one and done. And Houston snuck out with one earlier in the tournament. And kind of out-toughed someone down the stretch there, right? And instead, they end up here in this one on the wrong side of that, right? That's the way that goes. Hats off to a bunch of guys in this one and the incredible toughness that they showed. Javier Francis played his stones off, man. Couple huge dunks, great defense in rotation. He's guarding Walter Clayton on the perimeter. He got his 21 minutes, and I thought at one point he had his 5th foul, and it being the 5th one was actually called on Miles Uzan. Finished with 8 points, 6 rebounds, an impressive outing from him. Couple blocks. I think he got credit with 2 blocks. Hats off to LJ Cryer. played 37 minutes of this one, 19 points. No one shot the ball particularly well from three, but he was 4 of 11 for Houston. Some important defensive plays at a cry or two, rotating and covering big guys, tagging the roller with big guys. Just incredible stuff. JoJo Tugler, great defense. Jawan Roberts is a soldier. And like I said, it sucks. It sucks for a lot of reasons. I feel like this was the coming out party year for Houston in a lot of ways. I feel like you could shut down a lot of things with a lot of things this season. I think ultimately, in however many years or how many months, weeks, whatever, you look back and you will think about like how fantastic this season was and all of that. But the truth here is that as you get here, it just sucks because this is the last chance for this group. Next year's group is going to be totally different, bringing in multiple McDonald's All-Americans, the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Texas. For my money, one of the best players in the city of Houston, and who knows what else is out there coming to add to this roster. The roster only gets better, weirdly, as far as like national level of talent in all those regards and stuff like that. But gutting way for this group because this group felt special, right? The way this group felt special when they never quit at Kansas, the way this group felt special and never quit in a weird game with UCF, the way this group never quit against Arizona multiple times, Gonzaga, Purdue, the way they stomped Tennessee out, the way they stood up tall against Baylor in Waco. This group never quits. And that felt like such a calling card for this one. And Florida knew it. Florida knew what they were up against. That they brought it too, right? They're diving on the floor in the 40th minute. That's what it takes. Just an incredible run that, again, I think we'll look back on in weeks, months, years, whatever, and appreciate. I think we'll look back when Kelvin does beat that door down and get his title and appreciate. I think we'll look back in a lot of ways and appreciate at some point that doesn't make tonight easier. And so for all the folks there in the Alamo Dome, for all the folks at home in Houston, around the state of Texas or further, it's okay that this hurts, right? That's part of what makes this fun is that the excitement for all of the wins is going to have the same inverse opinion, like feeling when it doesn't go that way, right? And I don't mean to get so boxy here for a second, but man, like you're down the wire in that game. And like, down the wire in that game and you're right there. You don't get a shot off at the end. I got comments flying in here. I got Adrian, longtime listener, says, hell of a season. Hate the way it ended. Sad for Sampson. I've got Walter saying Francis was great. That dunk will go down in history. I think when we're at a happier moment, we'll think about that one for sure. Got a Florida fan says, good game to you guys. Good game to Florida. No hate there. They played a hell of a game. Locked on Big 12 chimes with the whole Big 12 is behind Houston tonight. Coogs got to rise to the top of the league, and now all 16 fan bases are behind them moving forward. I'm sure there will be a conversation at some point in a later episode in the offseason as we head into it about like what this means for Houston's spot in the Big 12, because I think that's an interesting conversation. You had a lot of things going on. Love these guys, just sick. I think we had that one up already. Thank you, Kelvin. Another one that's great to see. Would have liked Roberts getting the ball at least once in the last 6 possessions. We'll get into more basketball stuff and get out of the fields for a second. Not that that's any less fieldsy. Before we get too far, I do need to remind you guys today's show is brought to you by Game Time. So as you're looking at what to spend your offseason doing, there's nothing like the live energy of a sporting event, concert, theater, etc. When they're catching a last-minute MLB showdown, NBA playoffs, going to have Houston Rockets in it this year. Finding great seats at a great price can be a challenge. It used to be a challenge until you find Game Time. Game Time makes scoring last-minute tickets at the lowest prices easier than ever. Price actually drop as the game gets closer. They're all in pricing. You can see the total cost up front with no surprises. I like being able to see what my seat's going to look like in certain venues for certain events with the virtual app they've got, the virtual reality aspect of that. You can also, if you find the same section and row for cheaper somewhere else, they'll credit you back 110% of the difference. You know you're getting the best deal. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Down the Game Time app, Grant account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Again, Grant account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Down the Game Time today. Last minute, it's the lowest prices, guaranteed. Park Ranger, Locked on Coogs. Your comments are flying in. A lot of proud of the Coug kind of moments, and gotta love that. And honestly, I like that is where a lot of Houston heads are at. I think a lot of Houston fans understand the build this has been in the Kelvin Sampson era, and frankly, that build is not done. As we said in the first segment, you're bringing in 2 McDonald's All-Americans next year and all that. The pain of this game is not because the golden era of Houston Cougar basketball is over. The pain of this game is these are some of the names that built that era. And it just sucks to see them go out like that. And it doesn't suck because they didn't, play well for so much of the game. In fact, I thought early on, Houston kind of dictated the pace and control of the game. This felt like a game that could be down in the 50s. It was so low scoring early. First half was a breeze. First half went super, super quick. And then I don't mean to make excuses here, but I mean this in the most sincere way possible. There were 4 fouls in the first half on both teams combined. There were over 25 in the second half between both teams combined. And so what you got here is you've got a lot of, honestly, the shift in the game was just a lot for both teams. Both teams had to adjust to it, but the shift in the game was a lot. And Houston kind of had to ease off of some of the things that make them Houston in this one. And ultimately, I think that was part of their problem. Honestly, I think that if you saw Houston down the stretch in a lot of games, they would give fouls, and Tugler fouled out of a lot of games. Miles Uzan fouled out of a handful of games. And anyway, that's the way that goes, is you got to find a way to adjust, and Houston struggled to adjust. I'm not sure if Florida would say they adjust great either. I saw a stat pop up while I was setting things up that Florida went on a 10-4 run, but made just 1 field goal in those 10 points. And that's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. I don't mean to make things like the missed goaltending call, which was 2 points that should have been for Houston. Instead, Florida gets the ball, comes out and drills a 3. Even if you give them 3, Houston's 2 points, the whole game plays out a little bit different, obviously. Tit for tat, I guess that would be exactly tight, but I don't think you can quite do that, right? Just a lot of things went down here. And people got in my mentions and before all season long, talking about these moments of the game where Houston's offense stalls out, where they're trying to go late clock. They don't leave themselves a whole lot of time to do things. And ultimately, we're looking at a moment where that happens in the national championship game. It happened for a stretch of the Duke game, too. It happens for a stretch of the Tennessee game. There was no game it didn't happen. There was a stretch of the game where Houston struggled to make shots. They were shooting late shot clock shots on purpose, right? That's a strategic thing, and then not converting them. And ultimately, you end up with stalled long possessions with, giving the ball right back to Florida with an electric offense. You held that offense to below 70 for just the second time this season. The Kelvin Sampson defense works in that instance. But you go, what's this stretch here? Between the 40, you score 48 on LJ Cryer 3 at 11:29. Houston would not score again until free throws from Cryer at 7:13. And then Houston would not score a field goal until 6:24. At that point, it was 51-53, and Florida pretty quickly tied it up at 53-53. And I feel like, you can talk about both teams adjusting to how things are played. I think both teams struggled at times to adjust throughout how the game shifted a lot. But those are moments that felt like were part of the season all season. And as they got to this late shot clock thing, you also saw a lot of the weave turning into, so Houston runs this like weaving offense across the top, right? And you're going to have that weaving offense going across the top. And those end up turning into a lot of dribbling around to waste clock, which turns into some pretty ugly offense. And I think that was where things went as that, finished up. I also see a lot of people talking about like both online, in the comments here, et cetera. And you look at like, well, what does Houston do when their three-pointers aren't falling? Houston was one of the top three-point shooting teams, frankly, of all time. And they shot just 24% in this one. Some credit to that has to go to Florida's length and running Houston off the three-point line. I mentioned that LJ Cryer was 4 of 11. Malik Wilson banked one of his two three-point attempts. Emmanuel Sharp was 1 of 7, and those are the only three-pointers made in the game. Arsenal missed 1. Uzan missed 4. And I say that to say that, some of that is you have a bad shooting night. We said that these are 1-game samples. It's 1 game for Florida too, right? It's 1-game samples, not 7-game series, not 3-game series or anything like. You don't get home and homes out of this kind of a thing, right? And then down the stretch, you have trouble finding ways to get shots. Cryer attacking the baseline, he forces up a shot. It's not my favorite thing, but I like that the ball was at least in Cryer's hands. I loved the last set, finding Emmanuel for a dagger there. He just wasn't as open as he needed to be coming off of it, and it led to a no shot. I loved going for 3 there. You're down 2, you go for 3 and win the dang game. And that shows a lot of faith from Kelvin and his guys, and that faith in his guys is what got them to this point, right? You can't take the good and not take the bad in that sometimes. Ultimately, if Sharp is a split second more open, if he is fouled while shooting, because the guy's barreling, I think it was Clayton, was barreling down so hard on him, he's shooting free throws. Like suddenly we're not talking about that as a bad play anymore, right? I do kind of wish, just for Jawan's sake, if Jawan had gotten the ball a little bit more down the stretch, obviously that would have been fantastic. But that's more a personal thing. I just like that guy a lot, and I wanted him to have the ball a little bit more. I feel like he got smashed around a lot in this game, and he ended up at the free throw line just 4 times, which is a lot less, I think, than I felt like he probably earned. But Florida's going to say the same thing about their guys, so can't sit on that too much. I will say it was interesting that there's the technical called on Chinyelu, and from there, the next 12 calls, 11 of them were called on Houston. It felt like Florida was making a statement like, hey, we're here to be physical this half. And Houston had trouble between balancing the whistle and that heightened level of physicality. They kind of leaned more into the whistle side of it and didn't find that happy medium. Again, you held Florida to 65 points, though. I can't be too upset with that. I don't know if it would have all 3 Roberts fees if you gave him the ball much times down the stretch, if he forces overtime, because they probably would have smacked him, and they weren't calling every single thing inside down the stretch. I don't know if Cryer continues to Steve Nash dribble under the basket across the baseline, what pops out of that? Is it still a turnover? Right? We're all assuming if Sharp lets it fly from there, he gets the 3 and it goes in. And I love Emmanuel Sharp. I love Emmanuel Sharp, and I am not a guy that gets mad at him for these kinds of things. He was 1 of 7. Like, it's not a guarantee that shot goes down. And I think that it's easy to play results on a lot of that. I'm going to try not to. I get a lot of comments coming in. I get a lot of thoughts, and I also just like it. Just that's a rough way to end the year. Before we get too far, do to remind folks that today's show is brought to you by a handful of folks that help the show out every day. Welcome to Locked On Cougs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. I'm here with Locked On Cougs, Park Ainsworth. If you don't know by now, Houston does fall in the national title game 65-63. Again, we will look back on the season a lot in the coming weeks and days and weeks. We will look back on this game some. Ultimately, I think there will be moments you want back and then moments you're really proud of. The Sharp to Malik lob, the fantastic big dunks plural out of Javier Francis. Some killer 3-point shooting out of LJ Cryer for stretches of this one. He ultimately finished 4 of 11, but he was hot there for a second, man. And we'll talk about how this affects LJ Cryer's legacy. I think for my money, I've said all year that he's got to go down as one of the best players ever come through this conference. It's not that he's the best Baylor player or the best Houston player of all time or anything like that, but he's come through this conference as a wrecking ball, and he has been impressive. We'll see, and frankly, we also got to see what the future of this roster looks like. College basketball in 2025 is weird. You got a lot of stuff going on here as far as what you got. Miles Uzan has a lot of pro scouts. He'll probably do the deal where he goes and gets some feedback and comes back. I would imagine Sampson encourages his guys to do it a lot. I think Tugler will probably do the same, and Sharp may do the same as well. I don't think if those guys announce that in the next few days that they're gone, I would read that as going to get feedback and coming back. But we'll see. I got a Gator fan here saying, good game, Gators for real. Oh, where did that go? I just had it somewhere. Congrats from a Gator fan on a great season. It was a classic. We were fortunate to win. Good luck going forward. Again, to Tom Gore there from the Florida Gator side of things, you almost wish you got 7 of those, like it was pro baseball, pro basketball or something. We got to play best out of 7. I think that'd be a lot of fun. You can't fit 7 games into the March Madness style bracket or anything, but those games are a lot of fun. And we talked a lot going into this part of the bracket about is it good for college basketball that the 1 seeds all make it through? And I don't think between the 2 Final Four games and the national title game, as a basketball observer, you could say anything like this wasn't great for basketball, right? 3 tremendous basketball games to close out the season. Really, really impressive handful of games. I think that's good for the sport. I think that's good. Houston being good is good for the sport. You saw how many red shirts there were in the Alamo Dome. That's impressive. Hopefully some of these stupid allegations about Houston and fans and all that, people realize it's just a big city with a lot to do. When it's big games, people show up. And people showed up. I don't know. I'm trying to not be hyper negative. I don't know what the other podcasts are doing about post-game shows and stuff like that. I think it's easy to get to a negative place with this. I see people from Florida trying to be negative in the comments or whatever. And there is a Locked On Gator show, and Brandon's actually really cool. Brandon sent me one of the nicer. I've gotten way too many text messages after this game was over. But Brandon, Locked On Gators host, said, "Love you, buddy. Hell of a game," after the game was over. And that, I think, is kind of the mutual respect you got between programs like this. Pretty strong indicator of a lot of things. I got lots of things here. JoJo ain't going anywhere. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon, but I do think he'll go see what they tell him to work on. Talking about Tugler with a mid-range shot, top 10 draft pick. He's got the defense for it, so I guess we shall see. West Virginia said, "See you next year." Love you, Paul. I hope we have some fun competitive ones next year. I don't know what West Virginia's going to look like, but put something together and we'll see. Let's see. Good game, Gators from Walter here. Congratulating the winners there is probably the more classy thing to do. Lots of things here. I don't know what. Seth Ward here chimes in, maybe I'm being an optimistic type, but could be even better next year with the incoming class. Experience won't be replaced, but we could have some major talent coming in. I do think you got a lot of talent coming in, right? A lot of talent. And you see frankly, what I hope is an energizing bunch for Kelvin. Kelvin's going to turn 70 next year. He will hit his 800th win next year. His 800th win would have been tonight, which I think would have added to the story. Maybe that's the deal. Maybe it was 2-story book. Maybe that's the thing, is it was just 2-story book. To have his 800th win and Jawan's 150th and all that would have just been too much. It needs to happen a little dirtier than that. I think that it's interesting looking at this and thinking about next year, though, because the youth you would think would energize a guy like Kelvin, who was so spry for someone in his late 60s. and so much energy for a guy that you kind of forget that he's up there at that far in age. You also got to remember that Kellen was heavily involved in recruiting all those guys. And so as this program becomes more and more of Kellen Sampson's, it's a pretty good indicator of the kind of talent they're going to bring in. What I'm hearing about 2026 is the thing ain't stopping. I tell you that right now. No commits, anything like that, but the interest and intrigue is there. People see this team winning, and this team getting to the finals, and there are players out there think they can make the difference and moving things over. Talking about depth and bench and stuff like that, asking about Ramon Walker. I was under the impression he's going to look for the medical red shirt after what happened, but we shall see. I would imagine he goes forward. I don't know why he wouldn't. It'd be kind of the same thing as being a GA or something on the staff, because I don't think he's going away from the program anytime soon. But I would imagine if he can get that extra year of eligibility and do it while earning a master's or something like that and being on the bench and getting to work out every day, why wouldn't he? It's tough to be Houston Cougar, right? You had Phi Slamma Jamma close a couple times. You had 2021 where you ran into a buzzsaw. You had this one. And for moments, feel like you had this one in the bag. And then you didn't. And again, there were moments you still could have taken it there at the end. You were in this thing until the very last possession. And Houston's always in the game until the very last possession. And so many times this season, it went their way. And it just didn't quite tonight. Who knows if you played another 4 minutes, what happens in this game. Florida was kind of rolling there. But like we mentioned, they had a 10-4 run where 8 of their 10 points were from the free throw line. Who knows how this game finishes out. If they just have a little more time to go down or have a little more time in the last set or what have you. Just a rough way to go out. And this program is far from done. This program is far from anything crazy. This isn't a one-hit wonder. Second Final Four in 5 years, with an Elite Eight in the middle, a couple of Sweet 16s, and one of those Sweet 16s, you got the best player in America, and he hurts his ankle. I'm telling you, like, this thing is not slowing down. It just sucks right now. It sucks right now, as I keep saying, because these guys and who the roster is, and just this was a special collection of guys. You feel bad for Malik Wilson, who starts off at Louisiana and comes back around, ends up at Tech, has to sit out a year when he first gets to Houston for the second transfer. And frankly, that rule's not even around anymore, but he had to. And he gets on the floor and is just so impactful in his 19 minutes in this game and helping Houston along the way. He's not the most offensively talented guy, but he had 9 points, banked in a 3. Javier Francis, I mean, obviously you want to go out with a win, but short of that, he did just about everything else you want to do to come back from this one. LJ Cryer improved his game so much in his 2 years at Houston, transformed who he and his reputation are. That dude's a winner, man. I know he didn't come out on top tonight, but that dude's a winner, man. He fights, and he's not very big. He has trouble when he gets outsized. Just love it. And then I don't know how to adequately describe what Jawan Roberts has done for this program, what Jawan Roberts has done for the Sampsons, for you, for me, for the listeners of this. Just gave everything he had for better part of 6 years. Played on one leg with one hand last year. Playing 30 minutes a night this year, tough bruising matchups, guarding other teams' best players just because he has to, seizing matchups, doing what he's got to do. He makes game winners. He scores 20. He scores 4 when you need him to do other things. He's just, like, in so many ways, the same way Jamal Shed was the definition of this program, definition of the culture that Kelvin Sampson has built. Jawan Roberts was that too, and will be that with whatever he does next. I don't know if he wants to go, at a 6'8" power forward. I don't know what his options are looking like after college as far as he wants to go play in an overseas league, do some G League stuff, kind of work on some other parts of his game and keep growing. If he wants to just come back and work with Sampson and company, I'm sure they would take him to. I don't know what's next for Jawan. I'm just going to miss him, man. It's going to be weird watching Houston Cougar basketball without 13 on the floor. I think 13's got to go in the rafters. We'll talk about that later. That's an off-season topic, so we'll talk about that later. But that dude, I mean, he is cemented in this program's history in a way. In a program that's got Akeem, got Clyde, got Birdsong. Elvin Hayes, a program that's had true Naismith Hall of Fame talent come through it. Jalen Roberts is as big a part of it as anybody. And I don't know, man. I can't imagine watching this team play without him. Yeah, I don't know. I've talked too long. I gotta go. I gotta go figure something else out. We'll be back tomorrow. I guess this will function kind of as Tuesday's episode. At this point, it's 11:20. We'll be back Wednesday with more. We'll be back on Thursday, Friday, each and every day. Locked On Coogs, Premier Locked On podcast and everything. It's your team every day, even on the hard ones. And that one was really hard to swallow, but even on the hard ones. Go Coogs forever. Go Coogs.